Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, now that we know the issue that we permanently want to address, a lot of our homeowners tell us that they really appreciate understanding what caused these problems and how they came into the situation to begin with. So to better help answer those questions, I have this short video clip here that I'm going to play for you, just to help give you a better understanding and a better visual as to how your home was originally constructed and why you might be experiencing that groundwater seepage in the first place, okay? So to take a little bit of a deeper dive, there are pretty much three main components or three main causes that attribute to that groundwater seepage in your crawl space. The first is something that we call a rising water table. And what this is when your crawl space was originally constructed, they laid down something that's called a vapor barrier. Now this vapor barrier helps prevent any moisture wicking up through that soil and into your crawl space. The problem with this vapor barrier is that it isn't properly installed to begin with, and in turn, in most cases, it's just loosely laid over the soil. And so when you experience that groundwater seepage coming into your crawl space, that soil has already absorbed the amount of water that it can handle. And so that water that's coming in or seeping in is just going to pool over the top of it, pretty much creating a swimming pool effect, okay? The next main cause is your crawl space is already below grade of the exterior of your home. So in this case, when your crawl space was originally constructed, they had to excavate a site to build that crawl space. Once that crawl space was completed, they then had to backfill it with soil, and the soil isn't properly compacted afterwards. And it's going to create something that we call an active wedge or unstable soil. And so when you have a heavy rainstorm or a wet season, water likes to follow the path of least resistance, and in turn, it's going to have a narrow path through that unstable soil into your crawl space. And then once that water gets into your crawl space, it's pretty much just trapped there. As I mentioned before, your crawl space is below grade, and it's pretty much the lowest point. So that water has nowhere to evacuate to or escape from. So based upon this information that we reviewed together, does it make sense as to why we might be experiencing groundwater seepage in the first place? Awesome. So a lot of our homeowners at this point ask, well, what are my options to repair this type of situation? And so historically, there have been a few main options for repair that homeowners have attempted in the past. The first one is just going to be an exterior drainage. Now, all they're in turn doing is digging up that footing drain that was already failing them, okay? And this requires excavation, so it requires heavy equipment and maybe even damage to your landscaping, okay? The problem with that is they're just replacing the system that already failed you with the same system. Now, these footing drains are perforated, which means they have tiny holes on the sides of them. And in turn, what that does is it allows mud and other settlement to seep in there, causing them to clog. And the average lifespan for them is anywhere from 5 to 7 years. So does it make sense if we're looking for a permanent solution to just replace the system that already failed you with the exact same system? Exactly. Now, if you're looking for a permanent solution, right? So then homeowners thought, well, I'll just excavate then the exterior of my house. The problem with this is it only addresses the surface level runoff, and it doesn't address that water that's already seeped into the soil. And just looking at the drawing that I did for you, based on the topography of your home, you're looking about excavating 2 feet around the entire exterior of your house. So that means anything that might be in the way, HVAC system, your brand new deck, the beautiful deck that you just put out back, that all has to come out. So does that sound like an option for you? Exactly. And then out of desperation, homeowners attempted to do something that's a DIY or do it yourself. And they essentially make their own version of an open sump pump. Now the problem with this is, just based on this visual you can see here, does that look like a permanent solution? Exactly. And most of the time with these is they are overwhelmed or overworked, so they don't operate properly. And those discharge lines get clogged very easily. And in turn, you're just gonna end up with more groundwater seepage, and you're not permanently addressing the issue. So based on these historical options for repair, can we both agree that none of these are the permanent solution for you? Awesome. I'm glad you said that. So at this point, you're probably wondering, well, Connor, what is my solution to repair this? How do I permanently control my groundwater seepage, right? And so at Groundworks, we have actually created something called an AquaStop crawl drain system. And now our engineering department put together this short video clip that explains this at a really high level. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this for you real quick, and then we'll take a deeper dive as to what that means for you and for your home, okay?
A wet, muddy crawl space is certainly something no homeowner wants lurking under their home. In addition to being nasty and an eyesore, a wet crawl space, if not corrected, can lead to both structural issues and health challenges. The first step to fixing a wet crawl space is to permanently control groundwater seepage. The AquaStop drainage system, featuring patented easy flow technology, does just that. And here's how it works. A trench is hand dug around the entire perimeter inside your crawl space. Installing the drainage system inside your crawl space provides a permanent solution without the unnecessary removal of landscaping, porches, and sidewalks. Next, easy flow is installed in the trench. So as water enters the crawl space, it is captured by the easy flow and drained to a sealed sump pump system, preventing flooding of your crawl space. The easy flow drainage uses geosynthetic aggregate with engineered flow channels encased in a geotextile mesh. The design keeps dirt and sediment out, yet allows water to move through the system much faster than conventional methods. This guarantees you a system that never clogs, never fails, and is warranted for the life of your home.
Perfect. So to take a little bit of a deeper dive, as he was mentioning in that video, the installation process is super simple. What we're going to do is we're going to excavate or dig a trench around the entire perimeter of your crawl space wall. Okay. To give it a little better visual, that's what's kind of going to look like when it's done. From there, we're going to install a geosynthetic aggregate, which actually helps water flow through it 5 times faster as opposed to other aggregates or other gravel. And then we're going to lay that crawl drain on top of that aggregate. And the greatest thing about this crawl drain is that it's made out of a geotextile mesh, which in turn is going to allow that water to seep in without all that extra mud and settlement causing it to clog. And so now that we've captured that groundwater seepage, the next step is to then excavate it or to properly evacuate it from our crawl space. And so that's where our sump pump system comes into play. So once again, our engineering department put together this great video. I'm going to play it for you and we'll take a deeper dive, okay? Oops.
The heart of any crawl space waterproofing system is the sump pump. Unfortunately, not all sump pumps are created equal, and most will fail at some point, leaving you with structural issues, damaged building materials, and stored items. But more importantly, it directly contributes to mold growth and rot. Failure happens for one of 3 reasons. The pump stops working, the pump is overwhelmed during heavy rains, or power is lost due to a storm or a tripped circuit breaker. The AquaStop Triple addresses all 3 issues. As the name implies, the system features 3 independent pumps in one patented basin. The 3 pumps are staged on 2 integrated pump racks, and each pump has its own reed cage protected float switch. Here's what that means to you. The primary pump is responsible for moving water under normal circumstances. Should this pump have a mechanical failure, the rising water level activates the second pump, which is set slightly higher in the basin. Should the first pump not be able to keep up in a heavy storm, the second pump is activated by the rising water level, and both pumps now work together to effectively evacuate the captured water. If power is lost and the water rises above the level of both these pumps, a third sump pump, which is connected to a battery backup, now takes over. In the unlikely event that water passes all 3 operating ranges, the AquaStop monitoring system alerts you to rising water, allowing you to take preventive action. The AquaStop Triple provides the highest level of protection. You can sleep easy, knowing you will never have to worry about a flooded crawl space again.
Perfect. So once again, to take a little bit of a deeper dive as to what the system is all about. The greatest thing about the system, as you mentioned, is it is composed of 3 different pumps. And so what makes our pump better than most competitors is it actually self-cleans itself once every 5 days for about 7 seconds. Now you may be wondering why. And so with other sump pumps, they don't fail from overuse, they actually fail from being underused. And when they're underused, corrosion and other settlement may build up in them. So in turn, when they're supposed to activate, they don't because they're corroded. So ours self-cleans itself, like I said, once every 5 days for about 7 seconds to prevent that corrosion and settlement buildup. And honestly too, a lot of the time, the same issue that's going to cause our power to go out is the same issue that we're experiencing with our groundwater seepage, right? It's a heavy rainstorm. As he was mentioning though, if that ever happens and let's say your power goes out, that battery backup kicks in, and so you won't end up with more pooling water. Here's a little bit of a cutaway and an aerial shot as to what the system looks like within that basin. And so essentially, now that that water has been drained and captured into this basin for them to be pumped out, what we're gonna do in turn is it's gonna be pumped up and out at a 90-degree angle right here. And then it's gonna come out on the exterior of your crawlspace wall, and then it's gonna 90-degree back down into the soil where, and then it's gonna be buried. From there, we're gonna install about 10 to 20 feet of discharge line, and then 90-degree back up to either a yard well or a pop-up. Now, the yard well and pop-up work exactly the same. There's pretty much no difference between the two. It's just based upon what our supply chain has at the moment. So this is kind of a visual of what the yard well looks like. And then from there, all we're gonna do after we install those discharge lines and that pop-up or yard well is we're gonna backfill the soil, and this is the only thing you're gonna see in your backyard to know that you've permanently fixed your groundwater seepage issue. Now, another great feature about these pop-ups or these yard wells is they sit just low enough so that if you're having to do any yard maintenance like mowing, you're not gonna snag it on that, okay? And so how we calculate this, or how we calculate our material need, is based on the total linear footage of the entire perimeter of your crawl space wall. So right here on my field drawing, I have about 130 linear feet. And so we need at least one pump for every 150 feet. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that 130 feet of that crawl drain to the cart, and then I'll add that one sump pump system to the cart, and then like I said, about 10 to 20 feet of that discharge line plus a pop-up. So I'll add all that to our cart. And so perfect, that's pretty much the gist of it. At this point, I'll have to ask, do you have any questions for me? Awesome. Well, I'll go and add these all to the cart, and then I'll get started on your proposal, okay? Awesome.